Hey everyone, welcome to Clickheads. I'm Eddie the Chump, and today we're going to be talking about Valorant's Peeker's Advantage problem. Now, this is a somewhat controversial topic, as Riot have gone to great lengths to try and counter this bane of online FPS games, but we're starting to hear the first rumblings of discontent surrounding this issue. As a Cliff Notes summary of what Peeker's Advantage is, I'll explain it thusly. In an online environment, a player who takes a peek against a static one can have an advantage in certain scenarios. These advantages traditionally occur because the peeking player has latency to the server, which then has latency to the static player, meaning that the player who peeks has a latency advantage in what they see on their screen compared to the static player because of that networking round trip. In essence, the game engine is subject to delay, and it's in that delay time that a peeking player can see an opponent before they have a chance to react. There's several factors at play: how close each player is to a piece of cover, how much latency the peeking player has overall, and so on. It's way more complicated than how I've just explained it, but this is what is happening in layman's terms. Because of this, a player's performance can change between an online and offline environment, particularly if they're a very aggressive player. If you followed Pro CS at all, you'll know that there are players who excel online but get found out on LAN when the level playing field means that their aggressive peak play style can be dealt with much more effectively. This is pretty normal for online games, particularly FPS. It's been with us forever. But Riot have made very good sounding noises about how they're going to combat this problem. These include higher tick rate servers by default, Valorant having the industry standard 128 tick for online play, and some sort of predictive smoothing on character models to try and ensure the laggier player does not have such a severe advantage when peeking, which can be the case otherwise, although not in every scenario. Now, it's really good that the devs are aware and actively trying to combat this phenomenon. The downside is that because of their public stance, this has led to players believing Peeker's Advantage isn't in Valorant at all. But today, we're going to look at some clips and examples that show that this is not the case. In fact, in this player's experience, the Peeker's Advantage in Valorant might actually be worse than a comparable game like CSGO when you play that game on, say, Faceit servers at 128 tick. The first group of clips I'm going to show you comes from a popular Reddit post by the user Costa2G. In this little montage, we get to witness some questionable deaths, as well as some that can be explained properly. I want you to take a look at the last clip in particular, as it's very similar to one that I'm going to show you in a moment. In it, a Viper peeks the player, seemingly instantly knows where they are and kills them very, very quickly. Now, before I go any further, I want you to understand something. Whining about being killed by a superior player is something that happens all the time. I've done it, we've all done it. It happens, and it happens way more than people would like to admit. When looking for reasons as to why we die in a game like Valorant, our own error is usually last on the list. Lag, Peeker's Advantage, and all manner of excuses can crop up with disgruntled players. I'm not interested in giving myself or anyone else more excuses, but I do believe that Valorant does have an issue with Peeker's Advantage, and I'm not the only one. I want to show you this clip from Flom, who is a very experienced semi-pro from Counter-Strike. He's also a big Twitch streamer and has played tactical FPS on stream for many years. I want you to watch his breakdown of a now infamous set of clips from a pro scrim between AZK and Shazam. I'll play it for you now.
I've been telling you guys, I think there's like insane Peeker's Advantage in the game, despite what they've tried to say. And like, this is just like, I don't even think you see the half stutter. AZK even took like a second stutter on that, right? Like, meanwhile on AZK's POV, my man swung out and actually jiggled like twice. Look, he comes out and then look, and then he hits left again. He moved twice. I don't even think he moved a second time on Shazam's screen.
Now, I think it's important to realize that both players had the same ping in this match at 25 each. This is as close to even as we're ever going to get in an online environment, but you can clearly see that Shazam is on the bad side of this peak. He does not even see AZK's second movement to the left, or his right. On his screen, AZK just peeks him and deletes him. He doesn't even have time to shoot. Now, what's also worth noting is that Shazam is actually much further away from the geometry than AZK is, which would traditionally mean that he would see AZK first. But as you can see, that's not what happens. Flom also has this set of clips from a 10-man scrim against Mendo, where after Flom dies, Myth gets peeked by Mendo and seemingly gets destroyed while Mendo is still moving. I'll play that clip for you now, and the discussion that came afterwards.
For heaven?
Yeah, I've died to like 4 ultis this game. Peeker's Advantage is a very fun mechanic. Somebody in my chat, I don't think there's Peeker's Advantage in this game. The devs explained it. Oh no.
Definitely is.
Oh no, 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 no.
I'll be holding an angle, and I'll just get fucked.
It's not ping. I don't think it's ping
Okay,
related. I
so
think it's
how-
fog of war. I think it's fog of war related.
Now what's interesting is that in Flom's mind, Pika's advantage in Valorant doesn't come down to ping, like it would traditionally. Instead, he cites the fog of war and smoothing as the culprit. If you don't know what fog of war is, it's basically a technology that has been implemented to stop wall hacks from being viable in Valorant. As I understand it, player models behind cover are not actually rendered by the engine, instead only becoming visible at the last moment. You'd have to be an engineer to answer that question accurately, and I don't want to start saying we know why this sort of thing happens when we don't, but anecdotally, which is not scientific at all, ping has certainly been a contributing factor in my experience as well as all the players I regularly group with. There's two things I want to be upfront about here. One is that cognitive bias is for sure working on me. Because I think something is the case, I'm always looking for it, and when an example backs up my bias, I remember it, whereas if it runs counter to what I believe, my brain discounts that. Secondly, the region I play in, which is EU, regularly has high ping players in matches compared to NA. This is because the infrastructure for Valorant is still being rolled out and developed. COVID-19 has impacted Riot's plans, and they cannot be blamed at all for that. I'm not actually looking to blame anyone in particular with this issue. I'm just trying to raise a little awareness because I'd like the situation to improve overall. In EU, it's not uncommon to see multiple enemy players with 80 ping or above, sometimes even worse. This screenshot from one of Liam's games illustrates that. In it, he's facing an entire team with over 100 ping, which if you know anything about online FPS, should be terrible for them. But in this example, it's not going terribly. In fact, only one of their players is going negative, with two of them running double positive against a team with well under half their ping. This is the scenario that really upsets me whenever I play. There have been too many instances to document where a player's ping is well over double mine, and they can seemingly just peek me ignorantly without any utility and delete me before I can even react. My ping rests at about 40, so the players deleting me are around 80 or above, and it's not uncommon for a player of that kind of ping to be leading a lobby. It happens all the time, to the point where it makes me and others question exactly what is going on. It is totally possible that I'm just coming up against really good players a bit out of my region. We win a lot of our games, so MMR is probably quite high, and normally I would straight away go to my own comparative lack of skill as the explanation. But I play with people who are face at level 10 in CSGO. These players are really good, and they're having massively uneven games at the same time as me, and that is where the real problem comes in. Having connections that feel drastically uneven is the worst scenario. Sometimes a player who is no trouble for me in a duel will consistently peek and destroy a player repeatedly who is significantly better than me. Again, it could be in the context of the duels we take, where we are in relation to cover, etc., but this unevenness happens so often, I'm struggling to convince myself it's not a part of how the game is expressing itself. As I said, this might be worse in EU than it is in NA for various logistical reasons, but it's my experience that if a player with high ping is just ignorantly peeking, it's probably because of on their screen, opponents aren't even shooting back or reacting. I'm not personally interested in looking for reasons why I'm not a better player. In actual fact, I take my own improvement quite seriously, and as such, I look for how I was at fault in a given scenario. Was I too close to cover? Could they see me first? Did I make noise? But honestly speaking, this game feels harder to manage than CSGO ever did on a service like Faceit. It's still in beta, it's still really new, and it's being worked on every day, and I do still really enjoy the game, but we are starting to see this feedback about Pika's advantage from sources outside of our own opinions, and it's for this reasons that we've decided to talk about it now. There is also one other thing which I think could reasonably link to the feeling of severe Pika's advantage, and that's the movement and accuracy mechanics in Valorant and how they differ from, say, CSGO. Let me play you this clip from Summit's stream.
This right here is hogwash. Look. Look how accurate that is. See that?
Just what?
Why? With a game that should be like this to shoot, you should be having to counter strafe, shoot like that. You know what I'm saying? That's where the skill comes into Counter-Strike.
Now, as you can see, when walking, your gun can be pretty accurate. Not perfect, but good enough in a lot of cases. Summer also describes how you don't actually need to counter-strafe to be as accurate as you would have to be in CSGO. In CSGO, you have to come to a complete stop to be accurate. In fact, while moving left, for example, you should input the opposite direction on your movement keys for a split second before shooting. This is what counter-strafing is, and it's very punishing if you don't do it. Valorant is way more lenient, like by a lot, to the point where some people are just binding walk to the same button as shoot. So when you get peeked by someone who's seemingly running headshots you, this might be why. This happens in CS2 and is a part of Pika's advantage, whereby because of the latency, you don't see the enemy model stop at all, but in Valorant, it's actually just straight up easier to get away with actually moving and shooting. Now, I don't want to say this should be nerfed in a knee-jerk way. Valorant isn't CSGO, it doesn't need to be exactly the same. But the way walk shooting works now, I think is a bit too lenient to make much sense. There is a huge amount of skill in mastering CSGO's more punishing mechanics, and it seems Valorant just doesn't have that to the same extent. If that is by design, then it's something that we, the players, have to adapt to. But I do think it's also part of why holding an angle can feel impossible at times, especially if the peeking player has an advantage that Riot have worked so hard to eliminate. Again, I'm not looking to blame anyone or criticize the game unfairly. I think the harsh peeker's advantage phenomena is not down to any one reason, but a soup of all the things I've mentioned. Still evolving infrastructure, especially in EU, fog of war, lacks of movement mechanics, latency smoothing, etc. I'm still going to play the game, obviously, but it would be nice if this can be addressed more formally at some point once the game is more mature and out of beta. Maybe once ranked mode comes out and I'm placed more accurately, I'll find out it's actually all me and I've just been playing against complete gods in unrated. I have a sneaking suspicion that is not the case though. I'd really be interested to hear your guys' opinions on this kind of thing. Is this something you've noticed? Is this just cognitive bias working its evil magic on me? Let me know down below. I really hope you enjoyed the video and found it useful. If you like the content on this channel, please hit that subscribe button and check the bell icon so you get notified when we upload. Until next time.